Hello guys, welcome back to Annie Narrates. Here we like to review stories that beautiful people like yourselves post on the internet. So here's today's story. The title goes like this. Entitled sister-in-law and mother-in-law demand that I choose another name for my baby because they want the one I chose. Then accusing me of being quote-unquote obsessed with my sister-in-law when I say no. Hi, so I, 28 female, I'm 25 weeks pregnant, between 5 and 6 I'd say, and I'm in the middle of a fight with my mother-in-law and my sister-in-law over a name. My mother-in-law Susan, 56 female, and my sister-in-law Bonnie, 27 female, are fixated on the name Cecelia, but so am I, and I don't want to give it up. A lot of arguing has happened over this and I need to know if what I did was right or wrong. So, this all started like 3 days ago at Bonnie's baby shower. She's a lot further along than I am, and there are just 8 weeks or so to go before her due date, so that's why the naming situation is more urgent right now for us. At the shower, while we were opening gifts and sitting around, one of her friends casually asked me if I thought of what I was going to name my baby yet. Now, I haven't officially announced it or anything, but my husband and I have found out that it's more likely for us to have a daughter, and so we've been thinking about Cecelia for her name. It's important to me because Cecelia was my grandmother's middle name, and she was my favorite person growing up. She was wonderfully sweet and always made me feel special, so I want to honor her by naming my daughter after her. It's also just a really beautiful name otherwise too. And my husband likes it, so we have agreed upon that for now. I mentioned it to Bonnie's friend at the party, conversationally, and Bonnie chimed in at that point to tell me what a lovely name it was. I thanked her, and that was that. She'd already decided on a name, Nicole, for her daughter, and I didn't think she had any intention of changing that one. Both Bonnie and her husband were huge Nicole Kidman fans, and hence the name. So I didn't think much of mentioning the name I'd been planning on in front of her, because I didn't think she was going to try and steal it. The next day, Bonnie called me up and told me that she'd been thinking about the name I'd chosen, and she couldn't bring herself to forget about that one and let it go. So now, she decided that she was going to name her daughter Cecelia. She wasn't even asking me for my permission. She was informing me because she was very sure of it. So, I told her that she couldn't do that, and that I had already picked that name way before her, so she couldn't have it. To that, she said that I was getting hysterical, and that we could have a civilized discussion about this over dinner later that day. My husband and I were invited to Susan's house for dinner that day, for my father-in-law's birthday. So, I calmed down for the time being, but I was still feeling very annoyed and jittery. I told my husband about what his sister had said right after the phone call, but he just shrugged it off and said that he was sure that she wouldn't actually steal the name once we discussed it. So, we went to Susan's house in the evening and a bunch of people were there, all family, to celebrate my father-in-law's birthday. I greeted Bonnie the way I usually would, because I didn't think it was appropriate to bring something so petty in front of this many people, and the evening went well until dinner time. While we were sitting for dinner, Bonnie decided that it was the perfect time to discuss baby names. I tried to tell her that we'd talk about this later because I hadn't thought that there would be so many people over when she said that we'd talk about this at dinner, but she insisted on discussing it right then and there. Even Susan joined in on the discussion and told me that since Bonnie was a lot closer to her due date anyway, I should just let her have the name instead of making a big deal out of this. But of course, this was a big deal to me. So I got really mad and told them that I wasn't giving up the name and they could choose any other name that they wanted except this one. Besides, I had picked Cecelia first, so I got to name my daughter that, and also, it was my grandma's middle name, so I had more reasons to choose that name than they did. My husband also backed me up and said that I'd chosen the name first, so it wouldn't be fair to me if they named their daughter the same. The other family members pretended that they couldn't hear because it was getting awkward and they didn't want to intrude on something so domestic and personal. But I knew they were all ears, and that's one of the major reasons I didn't want to have this discussion at the dinner once I realized how many people were present. At that point, my husband backed me up. Bonnie scoffed and said it was just typical of me. I didn't understand what she meant by that and asked her to elaborate because I didn't like the sound of it at all. So then, Susan and Bonnie told me that they noticed I had a jealous streak, especially when it came to Bonnie, and now with the whole argument about the name, it was clearer than ever that I was quote-unquote obsessed with Bonnie. When she said that, I saw red and snapped right back at her, and that's where I might have been the a-hole. I told her that, if anything, she was the one who was obsessed with me and called her a little creep who did everything I did just because she had no personality of her own. Then I brought up how she always tried to copy me and she should be thanking me because she'd basically turned into a really cheap and tacky copy of me over the years, which was still a million times better than whatever she would have been had she not had me to draw inspiration from. After I said that, I stormed out of the house and my husband followed. So to be clear, I wasn't just baselessly accusing her of being a copycat. I had my reasons to say what I said. Before I became part of the family, Bonnie had no style at all and would only wear floral dresses and things straight out of her mother's closet. But then gradually, she started wearing more business casual clothes in muted colors, which was literally my style and my personal brand. And it wouldn't have been weird if that had been all she copied. But she also started cutting her hair short like me, to the exact same length, and even got bangs like mine. Then, she started copying my jewelry too, and went from wearing beaded bracelets to minimalist gold jewelry, which was also something I did. Now, people could say that maybe she just started following trends and certain aesthetics, but by now, she probably owned the same wardrobe as I did, had the same haircut, and styled herself the same way. And this happened in just the past 2 years after I married her brother, and she had more opportunities to watch me and hang out with me as compared to when we were dating. This business casual aesthetic has been around for a couple of years now, so she could have switched up her style way back if she wanted to, but she didn't, so I cannot believe that this wasn't intentional. I never said anything about it because I didn't want to come off as petty or a narcissist, and accusing someone of being a copycat is pretty much the epitome of both those things. But I'd had enough now. The sheer audacity to even accuse me of being obsessed with her, when it was she who had been copying every single move of mine ever since I'd married into this family. That's what really pissed me off, and I said the things I did. I didn't want to find out what happened after that, and left before she could say anything to me, as you guys already know. My husband also didn't stay back and walked out with me, so neither of us knew what happened after we left. We only found out when Susan called my husband the next morning and told him that we owed Bonnie a huge apology. After we'd left, she started crying because of my comments and had been crying so hard that she had to be taken away by her husband. I'd ruined the party, and I needed to apologize to my father-in-law for ruining his birthday dinner as well, because what I said was a lot louder and way more harsh than the obsessed comment that Susan and Bonnie had made. It also didn't help that she was heavily pregnant and was much further along than I was. I said I wasn't going to apologize, and I'm sticking to it. My husband is also on my side on this, but today I'm having second thoughts, and I don't know if it's because of the hormones or if I'm genuinely rethinking my decision. I need some clarity on this, so here I am, asking you guys about your thoughts on this. Am I the a-hole for accusing my sister-in-law of copying me at a family dinner after she and my mother-in-law said that I was quote-unquote obsessed with her because I refused to give up the name that I'd chosen for my daughter so she could choose it instead? So, I am not apologizing and I am sticking to my decision. You guys were right. I was probably just feeling a little too emotional because of the hormones and definitely would have regretted it if I apologized to her. Many people have asked me about how my relationship was with my in-laws in the past. So to answer your question, it's been alright. Susan and I never were the best friends or anything, but we were civil to each other. Bonnie and I, well, I was always a little creeped out by how she seemed to be morphing into me. She started copying bits and pieces of my style, and even the way I do my hair right from when she'd met me first, which was a couple years back, but it didn't become noticeable until after I got married and started spending more time with my in-laws. It was weird, but I never mentioned it because that was petty. Apart from the blatant copycat behavior, she was right, and there was never any bad blood between us, so this was new. It's been a week since the dinner, and people are still talking about it apparently. Not directly to me, but I have ears, namely my husband. A couple of his cousins who weren't present at the dinner asked him about what happened and had even called me a badass for speaking up against Bonnie, who people don't like much apparently. Not surprised at all that that's the case here, and even some gossiping aunts of his have contacted him, but unfortunately, only to tell him that the scene I'd caused at the dinner was unseemly and they didn't approve of it in the slightest. Lucky for them, I couldn't care less about their approval. The only person I did apologize to was my father-in-law, because I do think I ruined his birthday dinner, but he didn't seem to mind much. When I called him to tell him how sorry I was about what had happened at the dinner, he dismissed it immediately and said that he'd had 57 of these already, so he didn't mind it at all. He even said that he thought that what I'd said was perfectly justified because it wasn't me who had started that argument. It was Bonnie, and if she couldn't take it, then she shouldn't be so comfortable dishing it out either. Of course, he didn't make any other comment about what had happened because this was his wife and daughter he was talking about after all. But it felt good to know that even he was on my side in this whole thing. I haven't heard from Bonnie or Susan yet, but I don't think they're ready to just drop this and let it go so soon. If anything, they'll definitely be looking for ways to make this bigger instead of just cutting out the drama. Sucks for them, because I know for a fact that I'm in the right here, and I'm definitely not backing down. Worst comes to worst, we'll go no contact with them, and that'll be the best for everyone involved. It's been a little over a week since the dinner, and I had almost begun to think that Bonnie would drop it out, but no, I was wrong. That would be a little too mature for her. So today, she and Susan came by in the morning to ruin our weekend with their negativity. My husband was really drowsy in the morning, so he opened the door and let them in, and let me just tell you all, it was 7 in the morning. I can understand their need to create drama, but literally, who the hell in their right mind would go to someone else's house at 7 in the morning just to fight with them? Anyway, once they'd shown up, I told them to go back, because I was in no mood to talk to them since it was so early in the morning, but they didn't move and said that this was an urgent discussion and needed to be had right now. So I sat down and told them to make it quick, and Bonnie started talking about how insulting it had been to be on the receiving end of my words at the dinner the other day. She'd waited for a week and even more for me to do the right thing and issue a public apology, but I hadn't done that, so now she was here to ask me to apologize on social media and accept that whatever I had said was all lies. I told her to buzz off and not bother me again, because the sheer guts to come to my house at 7 in the morning and then tell me to apologize for something that she'd pushed me to do was just infuriating on so many levels. She was lucky that I hadn't kicked her out on the spot. Even my husband told them to shut up, but they continued to talk their BS. Then Susan stood up with her face all red and blotchy like it usually gets whenever she's pissed off about something, and accused me of wanting to humiliate her daughter because I was obsessed, jealous, and crazy. I wish I had a mirror in my hand at the time to hold it up to both of them and show them their own faces, because what they were describing was literally themselves. There was a lot of fighting afterward, and I told her how the way that she'd copied my entire personal style and wardrobe wasn't lost on me, and now that there was nothing else to copy, She wanted to steal my baby's name too. It didn't even hold any significance to her the way it did for me. And yet here we were, fighting about it at 7 in the morning on a weekend. She kept repeating that this was just me being petty and insecure like a parrot, but saying something repeatedly doesn't make it true. I got really annoyed after a while and decided to kick them both out by force. I knew that this could get me into trouble, so I hadn't done this before, but I'd been left with no other option. There was only so much that a person could take before they finally snapped, and I snapped. So then I grabbed them both by their arms and shoved them towards the door forcefully. Then I pushed them out while they were still complaining about being manhandled and slammed the door shut. To make sure they didn't come back, I even made a pretend phone call to the cops, but didn't actually call them because it would be too much of a hassle. My husband tried to calm me down with a cup of tea after that, but I was still seething from whatever they just said. After that intense morning, my husband and I came to the conclusion that the only way forward now is to cut them off permanently and for good. My husband even apologized for letting them in at all, and he wouldn't have done so if he had even a clue as to what sort of clash this would lead to eventually, but I forgive him. The poor guy had just woken up and had no idea what he was doing. Had I been the one to get up and open the door, I probably would have done the same thing and let them in too. If I'm being honest, I probably would have just apologized and let it go just for those 5 more minutes of sleep, and I kinda wish I'd done just that. Would have saved me a lot of drama today for sure. My husband and I blocked Bonnie and Susan on every possible platform a couple of days ago, and they still somehow found a way to get on my nerves today. I must hand it to them, they definitely are dedicated. Bonnie's on maternity leave right now, so the lack of having something to do must be messing with her brain right now, because I can't think of any other reason 2 people could stoop so low just to get back at me. And Susan probably just hates me in general, so that's why she's acting out like this. So anyway, it's been 4 days since we kicked them out of our home, and our lives too, and we had assumed that at least for now they'd have some self-respect and leave us alone, because they're not getting any apology out of me. I was wrong because this evening, around 5, I started receiving calls and texts from my husband's family members and a couple of his friends from high school and college. I didn't understand what was going on, so I decided to respond to one of his friends who had texted me. She texted me saying, "I just saw Bonnie's post on Instagram. I want to tell you that we're all here for you, and will be no matter what. We love you, and can't wait for you to come back," which was hella confusing because as far as I knew, I had no issues that could require people to send me messages like these. Even the other texts were along the same lines, and only wish that I'd get well soon, and they'd be waiting for me to come back stronger. Come back from where exactly, I had no idea. It got to the point where my phone was busting up the table with notifications, so I decided to ask one of them to send me what the post was, because I didn't know what was going on. And apparently, Bonnie and Susan had put a joint statement from the family side that I had recently been diagnosed with NPD, narcissistic personality disorder, by a professional, and had been hiding that from everyone. But my outburst at the dinner party had been, quote, a moment of weakness, end quote, where I'd let it come through, and that I was sorry about that. And I was now heading to rehab because I'd also developed alcoholism and had become a high-functioning alcoholic, but my husband had finally come to his senses and was sending me away to get better. They'd put this statement out as a family and had even added my husband's name on the post. But of course, he didn't even know about it. I was stunned and tried to call my husband as soon as I finished reading the post, but unfortunately he was stuck working late. He'd already told me that he wouldn't be reachable in the evening today because he had an important meeting with a client, but I left him a message nevertheless, because at least then he would see this as soon as he was done with the meeting. I was beyond outraged and still am because what they'd done was absolutely unacceptable. I didn't even wait for my husband to respond to the text I sent him before I called my mother, who is a lawyer, and told her all about what had happened. I have grounds to sue for defamation, and the only reason I even waited to give my mother the go-ahead to start the process was so that I could discuss this with my husband first. I didn't want his permission or anything. I'm not that kind of wife, but I do think discussing something like this would be important, especially when it's his family I'm going after. He saw my text a couple of minutes after his meeting was over and came back home as soon as he could. We talked about it and told my mom that we wanted to go ahead with the lawsuit because this was just psychotic behavior. I put up a post of my own to clear the air, but people are still texting me, which is really annoying but kind of sweet too, because I know that they're doing that out of concern for me. All I know right now is that Bonnie and Susan are going down. Mostly Bonnie because she's the one who made the post, but I'm also coming after Susan because she'd been tagged in the post too, and I know she was in on it. My father-in-law has no social media, so he couldn't have known what his wife and daughter were up to, and we obviously didn't know so clearly this was not a statement that the family was putting out. It was something they wanted to put out, and now they have hell to pay for it. Hey everyone, so sorry about the timing of this post. I know I'm really late, but I was very sick, and since I'm still working, it's been a lot. I'm in my third trimester of pregnancy now, and unfortunately, things have been really hectic for me. It's all the fatigue that's getting to me, and my sleep cycles have also become really irregular. Not to mention the strange cravings and the subsequent stomach problems. I'm a total mess right now, which is why I haven't been able to post here or even check Reddit for the last 2 weeks. Many things have happened since my last update, but most importantly, Bonnie and Susan had to issue a public apology to me and my husband. They hadn't thought that we would actually sue them, so they were shocked when they were served and started trying to manipulate my husband, trying to turn him against me and playing the "but we're a family" card to make us all cancel the suit. They contacted him through other numbers and sent him messages on his work email because they had no other way. He handled them well and shut them down by reminding them of what they'd done to me. If we weren't family when they were defaming me, then we weren't family now either, and he wasn't gonna listen to any of their bullcrap. I wasn't even suing them for money, so the reaction was even more stupid to me. All I wanted from them was an apology for what they said about me and for them to acknowledge that they lied. I had to sue them to force them to do something decent people would have done already. To be fair, decent people would have never created such a situation in the first place. Anyway, we did settle out of court after a lot of drama and tears. They did post a public apology, took down their original post, and acknowledged that they made up the whole thing. I unblocked them just to personally see that post and even liked it. I wanted to leave a kissy emoji face, but they turned the comments off, probably out of fear that I would do that. Now they're the ones who want no contact with us, because clearly my husband cannot be manipulated, and if he's not dancing to their tunes, they don't want him. What a lovely mother-daughter duo. My father-in-law is also on our side, but he's keeping the contact low-key to maintain the peace, because he says that he's too old to pick fights over petty stuff like this now, and honestly, I get what he's saying. I'm not old, but I'm pregnant, and I'm really tired most of the time, have weird aches all the time, and have to worry about my health more now, so I kinda get where he's coming from. But the bottom line is, all is okay now, and I won't have to deal with these ridiculous women anymore. Alright guys, that was it for today's story. Thank you very much for listening. Go ahead and smash the like button and subscribe for more stories. Thanks again guys, we will be seeing you in the next one.